session is Mr. Kapil Rao. He is the National President of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. He has been managing FMCG and auto component business at the strategic corporate level for over 25 years and is the board member of the Vesoi Group companies for 2 decades. He is currently serving as advisor to the Vesoi Group. He is the Executive Council member of the International Chamber of Commerce, India, and the coordinator to chair the International Chamber of Commerce Asia Pacific CEO Forum. Welcome, sir. I now hand over the session to the chair, Mr. Deepak Aswani.
Hello. Am I audible? A very good morning to both the virtual people and the people present here. I'd like to thank Dustin for the opening remarks that he made. In fact, that set the trend discussion. Typically, whenever we talk of any relationship, it also means that we have to talk about the finances and the economics behind it also. Most of it gets vitiated because of bad planning or bad relationships on these fronts. India has always been a source of rich wealth, and I think history speaks for itself. I think when you hear Shashi Kapoor, he always talks about the way the British plundered India and took away so much wealth. We hear of all the Persian warriors who came here and literally left us with almost nothing. But India is now coming back in a big way. And typically what happens now is that trade and economic partnership is now growing. And the way India is moving towards partnership with various countries, particularly the U.S. The U.S. remains the largest trading partner with India. And like Justin mentioned, that the foreign trade between the two countries, which was planned to be almost about 500 crores. We had 2-3 CEO forums, we had trade meeting, and in November also there was a India-US Trade Policy Forum ministerial meeting, and now the Q1 in which the target set for foreign trade is about 500 crores. But we have only reached 145 crores in the year 2020. This is despite the pandemic. The pandemic actually upset the entire working of the Indian economy. And out of this 145 crores, the 112.626 billion were exports to the US. 71.203 million exports to the US and 41.423 billion imports. The main commodities that were exported to the US are precious and semi-precious stones, drugs and pharmaceuticals, petroleum products, cotton fabrics, garments, marine products, iron and steel products, electrical equipment, and auto components. Crude oil and then airplanes were the biggest import from the US. Crude oil itself was about 10,395 million. And other items of imports are pearls, precious and semi-precious stones for reprocessing, petroleum products, coke, coal, organic chemicals, gold, paper, and paperboard. Recently, the US approved imports of mangoes and pomegranate, which sets the tone for agricultural export, and also secured New Delhi's approval to export cherries, alfalfa, hay, pork, and pork products to India, which means that we are opening up on all fronts, and particularly with logistics and supply chain management taking a big high in India now. In fact, the whole country is now moving to better logistics, communication. Communication, of course, they're already up there. And now with the highways and the rail and the waterways being planned, I think in the next few years there will be quicker and faster means of transportation. And some of the problems that we face in the trade could be avoided right now. Our challenge today would be to really look a little bit at the past, mostly the present, what has happened now, where we stand, particularly in the current environment. So what happens now is when it comes to defense equipment, there is going to be an issue. And in the future. So on my panel, we have two experts. Dr. Pradhan, of course, he introduced separately, and a couple. So I'll leave it to them to explain better. I'll intervene in case there is any necessity, which I don't think will be. And I look forward to a few good questions and from the audience, so that there's an active audience here, and we get to some actually achievable goals at the end of this discussion. Thank you once again, CBPR, for inviting me, and look forward to a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
I request Dr. Pradhan to read some of the slides.
Very good morning to everybody. First of all, I'm privileged to be invited to speak here for this forum, and that's very enriching, engagement, interaction that is happening for the last 2 days, yesterday and today. Wonderful, academic platform. I take this opportunity first of all to thank the entire CBPR team and Dr. Dhanraj for this wonderful, it's almost like a festival of ideas and threat. My theme today is that, of course, change is there, continuity has to take place, and it is in that context we look at, very often India is called as the largest democracy in the world, and US, that's the largest market. Everybody wants to be there, students, traders, visitors. So it's just a platform of convergence for many countries in the world, and so naturally it is a point of convergence. Now, this is a matter of privilege for Indians to know that India runs trade surplus only with one country in the world, and that's the United States. We have been historically running a trade surplus with them. So continuously running trade surplus has several connotations. As we started, many of the senior people would be familiar, we started with the PL480 in the 60s, and that was never a very appreciated in the Indian intellectual circle. By the time we realized what's happening, it was already late, and then, but that was 1960s. 1960s was a time frame where India was beginning. Our institutions and investments were beginning to happen. Market, we were not manufacturing much. Today, after 60 years, I think we have moved far too ahead. And it is in that context, if you look at this particular graph, very interestingly, we have continuously, our exports to US has increased, and imports from US is always they are exporting less to us, and we are exporting more. That means we are selling more and we are earning more. So naturally, we are at privilege. And last year it was $112 billion worth of total trade, 71 billion exports, and 41 billion worth of imports. So naturally, if I'm now selling too many things or making money out of it or whatever, I mean, this particular graph, it gives a gross picture of how we appreciate. So that's what is not structurally very, very correct. There's far more fascinating interpretation that is available out of this. That we are running a trade surplus continuously, but then now I change it to what we call in economics, we have to understand trade, like quantity of trade. It can be in tons of higher quantity, but in terms of value, in terms of income, may not necessarily be translated to that much of value. And that's why one must decipher as to how do you understand the trade. And that's where we have reasons to see. This is gross barter terms of trade. What it also, there's a small formula there, MQ by XQ. That means import quantity by export quantity multiplied by 100, and that's where you see the quantity to quantity, 100 tons versus 90 tons. So that's where, if we look at this particular graph, I'm looking at it from the India's point of view. India's terms of trade, G terms of trade, that means quantitative terms of trade with US is in decline. But earlier, we realized that bilateral trade has increased. We are running trade surplus, but quantitatively, there's a historic decline in that not exactly means that quantitatively we are declining, but proportionately we are declining. But very interestingly, when you convert that quantity to understand, what do you get out of it? Finally, trade is for profit or prosperity. So what you get is that the next step of terms of trade is what we calculated as net barter terms of trade. What it talks about, not the quantity, it talks about at what rate you are exchanging your exports with imports. And that's where, if you look at it, this is a very, very positive graph that is giving 40 years trend, where export price or the rate at which we are exchanging our exports against our imports for which we pay, that's been favorable. So any country that's N is favorable is likely to be doing good. If at all quantity is beneficial or strong, then it is further benefit, further advantages. At good rate, we are exchanging our exports. Then this is income terms of trade. Yes, of course, we are exchanging in a good rate. Are we earning out of it? And that's where ITOT, or income terms of TOT, when you look at it, it is a privilege slide for everybody in India to look at, that we are earning. That means USA is one platform, trade platform for India, where we have a continuous benefit of income terms of trade. We are earning from them. When we earn, then it takes us to the next step of understanding DTOT, or we call it as double factorial terms of trade. What it talks about is that a simple calculation that if I'm exporting this pen, India is exporting this pen, then India has to manufacture this. If China, USA, and Sweden, all of them are manufacturing a similar kind of a pen, then what happens is that at what efficiency I produce this, manufacture this, so that I have market advantage in international level. So if I'm selling it at $100 and my manufacturing cost or my labor, they go on strike every alternative day, there's a load shedding, and there is a many other concerns. And my factory to the seaport distance is 300 kilometers, and then potholes and all that. Each of these potholes or each time there's a load shedding in the industrial sector, it reduces your export productivity ratio of your country. So DTOT, it specially talks about as to where you need to be efficient. You might be earning, yes, rate also you must be exchanging good, but then unless your productivity efficiency is achieved, you cannot. So if I'm spending, let's say 90 rupees to manufacture this, and the Americans and the Chinese are able to do it for 60 rupees or 70 rupees, they already have a structured built-up advantage in terms of trade. And that's where DTOT here you see this graph, what it talks about, that now we have, India has reasonably achieved a structural efficiency in terms of our productivity in the market, what we manufacture. And that's where, and any country's DTOT is good, then income terms of trade is likely to be good, and then rate is good, at good rate you're exchanging, then obviously you're doing well. Only the quantity, that all depends on both the countries in terms of their ability to absorb and all that. That brings us to one more layer. I think nobody in the trade analysis ever talks about, that so many Indian students, they every year they go to study in US. We subsidize the American universities, and both Western Europe and US. $27 billion, I understand, is the earning of the American universities from the international students. And this is a very fascinating export commodity education, that we go there spending our own airfare, and we eat in their restaurants, canteens, and then buy books and accommodation and all that. None of them have any tariff, and it is entirely our cost. So anybody who's exporting education, that's a wonderful thing to you create knowledge capital, and also earn by several layers of exporting this kind of it. This has never been talked about in the trade forums. So this is one factor that is to be also accommodated in the narratives. Now, the fact that India has matured, the fact that the bilateral trade engagement has continuously increased, the fact that India is earning well out of the, and we have been more efficient, and in terms of the size of our market, India buys roughly around 13 to 15 million mobiles every month, and a similar quantity of televisions per annum. This is a very large market. The Americans have the buying ability, and then they are also a knowledge economy. So naturally, there has to be bilateral interest of engagement or deeper access into the markets, each other's markets and all that. So the trade deficit that we see has gradually, therefore, been part of the American interest to bridge the gap and bring India into negotiations so that we have a bilateral access to each other's market. And that's where, 2019, they have this GSP, that is generalized system of preferences. That's what preferences India got in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Now, in my opinion, India did not have to be given such kind of a privilege also. Very often we demand that we should be given concession. But very often, Michael Porter is a Swedish economist. He talks about that if at all you have to be good in the market, efficient and earning, then you must give up all your concessions. Stand alone, compete, be efficient. And that's what Japan, Switzerland, many of the small countries, Switzerland doesn't produce coca, but then they're the chocolate leaders. Japan hardly has any resource, but then they are automobile electronics leaders. And that's where actually Michael Porter's theory is a competitive advantage that one must create for itself. And how do you do that? Unless you throw yourself into the open market, compete efficiently as possible. That's where you create your structural strength. And that's where I think the Americans have been now catching up with the realities that they need also India's market, greater access. We cannot be conservative and then have all the advantages from them. That's where I think it is from their side, you want to breach the trade deficit and correspondingly bring India into a state of regulation so that there's a mutuality between both the countries in terms of the advantages out of the trade. WTO has a very fascinating slogan is that the trade must move beyond the borders. If the trade doesn't move, then the soldiers will move. And that's what Ukraine is. Ukraine is not the largest trading partner of Russia. Most of the CIS countries, China has taken up their market and all that. So if at all there is a great amount of trade, then soldiers will have a rest time. Goods will create employment and all of that. And that's where I think we have to mutually respect both the sides in terms of tariff-wise. India globally has been one of the most conservative countries. We are very skeptical of tariff, very, very high tariff. Always, even Pakistan tariff is comparatively lesser than ours. So we have to be sensitive to that. And that involves the moment that the day India is competitive in all its production chain and the supply chain, I think the tariff and all those notions, like any developed countries, for that matter, be it Japan or the Americans or the Western Europe, the tariff rate is between 1.5 to 3.5%, whereas ours is coming to 12, 13, 14%, one of the largest in the world. So today, 2022, when India has already arrived in the international board in the geopolitics, Prime Minister Modi is in demand that he negotiate between Ukraine and Russia. India is a large market, so naturally there's a global interest to be there in India, and we have arrived. We have to acknowledge that and take the responsibility that we have arrived. And anybody who arrives has to have a value system, has to have an orientation also, and also a culture of being efficient and then creating your presence. So greater market therefore is necessary. But one of the limitations between US and India is that if at all they want access to our farm sector. But one of the structural limitations of the farm sector is that US, only 1% of their labor market, 330 million people, and out of that only 1% is in the agriculture sector. Whereas in India, we have 1330 million people, out of that 50% are in the labor market. And our labor market size itself is also US labor market, nearly 50% of the market is 50% of the population is working population, whereas ours is roughly around 41% people work in India. That means our size of labor itself is also compared to China, it is 59-60%. Most of the developed countries is roughly around 50%, whereas ours 50% of our labor market is in the farm sector. And very, it's a very, very controversial issue also, that such a huge labor market in the agriculture sector. So if at all we give access, then what happens to the farmers? The whole sector will be a social challenge, socio-economic challenge for India as a whole itself. And that's where I think one may remember the case of Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew is not the former Prime Minister of Singapore, rather is a South Korean agriculture graduate, and who stabbed himself to death in the 2004 Cancun Summit, WTO Cancun Summit in Mexico. And he was protesting that they let the ethnic agriculture patterns be protected. If we open the market, 50% of our labor is involved there. Productivity-wise, India's agrarian productivity is not great. And if we open that, you will be Indian market will be flooded with international cheaper food grains and all that. Our markets will be, they're already committing suicide, and it will be disaster. So it has to be not in a very aggressive level, it has to be dealt with. It has to be very systematically negotiated in terms of the structural strength of both the sides. And that's where second concern is that IPR and personal data sharing modes and all those areas also they have concern. Naturally, any knowledge economy, they would more be transparent, open. We are not transparent. And then you have the data equalization levy, which is e-commerce taxes, and that India has introduced from 2016, that is also another area of concern for them. So we are in a strong footing, good understanding, good arrangements are already in place. Limitations and all that, it is in place, which can always be negotiated. But the future opportunities, if at all we look at, a big opportunity that comes as a result of your Paris climate agreement or Glasgow, call it COP 21, 26, all of them, what they have said is that the global future is going to be net zero compatible. That means everything has to be green. Your energy and energy efficiency to clean carbon emission has to be reduced. And so your seaports, vessel traffic, everywhere, it has to be a green environment. So what we call it as smart port, green shipping, and net zero compatibility. And these are not simple narratives. Now, 193 countries have already ratified it. And Prime Minister Modi last year committed in Glasgow that India will be net zero compatible by 2060. The Americans have committed to be by 2050. The Chinese have committed to 2060. For the next 20-30 years, there's going to be a real rush of technology dealing and paddling of knowledge in terms of creating smart ports or the alternative fuel energy, be it the hydrogen and methanol and many of these sectors. You need intense amount of even solar energy or many other wind energy, many of these kind of things that are. Why this particular sector is going to be more critical is that India is already on its Sagarmala mode. Sagarmala is the Maritime Modernization Program 2015 to 2035, and it's creating a huge amount of network of productivity, connectivity, coastal industrialization, and number of things that's happening. Also, it is proposing to create 10 million jobs. And that's where India is already harping on that. And there's a global agenda and demand that every country has to conform. And that's where I think one of the strongest partnerships that is possible between both the countries. And that's where if we look at it, I'm sure the State Department and the Trade Ministry, both sides are intelligent people that they have set up what we call a hydrogen task force. Between hydrogen is the future energy, one of the sources, and zero carbon emission and all those kind of things. That's where. So what we are looking at, or what possibly can create a large kind of engagement between both the sides, so that soldiers don't cross the borders, other goods and services and employments being created, is that the knowledge sector, the research sector, and that's where like hydrogen, green energy components, smart ports like smart cities, smart ports, and many such smart entities are beginning to be the focus, and it's going to be there. Another area, being in academics, I feel very sad that we do not have MITs. We have JNU, and we need MITs, not one. India has already arrived. If at all anything that sustains the country's ability is its knowledge system. And I feel sad that whenever I look at data, I have to look at the American sources to get my data. And that's where the basic difference between a developed country and a developing country is that developing countries hide it so that nobody can question it. The developed countries, even if it is not favorable, they open it so that it goes through a public scrutiny. And then, so that's where I think, university sector, not particularly traditional university patterns, like West Asia, I think many of the European and other universities have come up, good universities have come up. I think that's where I think we have a very strong investment possibility. And then high technology, smart ports, green shipping, liquid, energy sector is a great possibility. Solar panels and those kind of possibilities are also there. Trade, these are all the new generations of trade that's going to be there. Nobody can avoid it, and that's where. Weapons, of course, we have always been the largest buyer, and there will always be negotiation whether we buy it from Russia or from US, and Ukraine being the benchmark. Now it has to be juggling between the two sides. So that's where I think now The context is the fourth industrial revolution, and Geneva School of Economics, Richard Baldwin, who talked about the fourth industrial revolution, also talked about there's a great convergence. You have a smart, everything smart. So the American capital, Indian labor, and that's where one of the major development that happened, wealth of India that emerged is also at the same time when the Americans got deindustrialized, what Richard Baldwin talks about that China, India, Indonesia, or BRICS, whatever that emerged, is also at the cost of the North American deindustrialization of North America and Western Europe. Great convergence. The capital heavy countries, capital met, interacted, or converged with the cheaper labor wherever they were available. And they were, incidentally, they were there in India, they were there in China, they were there in Mexico, and that's where you have now. So the fourth industrial revolution being the next language of engagement, that's where smart, high-tech themes, that's going to be the future of our engagement. And I think it's a wonderfully cordial engagement today. So many new players have come in, and both have to wisely steer this ship so that we are safe and comfortable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pradhan, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you, Professor, to come out and open up a lot of knowledge buds. Also, find that this is what we go along with.
Good morning, everybody. My thanks to CPPR and the United States Consulate General in Chennai for setting up this convention, a global convention, which I think is talking about something extremely important for the entire planet, not just our two countries. India and the United States have actually shared a lot with each other informally, going back to the Chicago Convention when the famous Zero Lecture took place and spirituality, Indian spirituality was introduced into the United States. Indian relations, we need change. No, we don't need to change. We are who we are. An American is an American, an Indian is an Indian. We are, even if we are opposites, it's opposites that attract, it's opposites that can have a dialogue with each other. Yes men don't have dialogues, and there's no progress when you just simply say yes. Do we have Should we have continuity? Definitely, we need to have continuity. And before that continuity, we need to have a focus on various issues that are important, not just for India and the United States, but for the world overall. We are now on a global stage. It's not just a question about a country or two countries. Transformation, certainly the most important thing we need is transformation, not just in our relations, but more importantly, in our way of life, in our way of conducting our economic affairs, and most importantly, in the way we view the environment and the planet in which we live in. Before I came here, I focused on what used to be the big E. So the big E was always all about the economy. It was always about profit. It was only about balance sheets, share valuations, trillion-dollar enterprises, and that's it. That was the focus, pure profit. Cost reduction, profit. That's the problem, and that is why we have had a pandemic. That is why we are having global warming. And both these aspects, which is pestilence and warming, are going to be an increasing fact of life in the years to come. We must know how to embrace what is to come. And once you know how to embrace it and cope with it, you can change yourself and you can survive and you can even prosper. So I thought about 3 E's on which we need to focus rather than one big E, and which is the conservation of energy, conservation of ecology, and conservation of the environment. It's imperative that we conserve resources, we conserve our time. The pandemic has even taught us that you don't need to move in order to be productive. You can actually stay home and be productive in a sense, though definitely a conference like this, a convention like this has to happen. Human exchange has to happen. Man is a social animal, but we have to be a socially responsible, environmentally responsible animal. So the 3 E's is what has become important to contend with and not exactly vanquish. I couldn't say vanquish, but certainly control and bring more sense to 3 C's. And the 3 C's is crude oil. All byproducts of crude oil are the biggest polluters to this planet, period. It starts there and it ends there. Alternate energy has to be the way forward, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be lithium, I don't know, anything. In terms of the second C, consumerism. Consumerism was a good thing, definitely. It created jobs, it created employment, it created economic generation of resources, fabulous. But it was singular in nature. Why? Because we only focused on cost reduction, cheap goods, cheap services, profit, and employing everyone. But that consumerism is based on one critical negative factor, and that is waste. It is waste driven. We have to eliminate waste. Waste of time, waste of energy, waste of resources, waste of food. Now, we had an Indo-American Chamber meeting last night. Some of the members are here. And I did this in Calcutta also. And in Calcutta, actually, we structured the evening where the food, it was a sit-down dinner, classy, very nice, very classy. And we ensured that we only put just enough food on the plate for you to consume. And it looked very stylish. It was very well done. So you looked at it, you felt nice, you ate it. You maybe felt a little hungry after that, but you finished your food, the plate was empty. right? That was the criteria. Don't waste your food. You may have to eat, but there are billions who don't have anything to eat. So if you don't waste and you consume sensibly, then resources can be given, food can be given to others, and therefore you are helping out there. So that's the second thing, consumerism. I have a tomato ketchup story which are related to some of you out here. And it's typical of what consumerism is about in this modern day and age, and which needs to transform. And that's where America and India can come together, apart from other issues. So it's like this, that it's a humble tomato that's grown. It takes a lot of water, a lot of oxygen, a lot of resources, fertilizer, if at all, and of course, sunshine. Now you take this tomato and then you transport a polluting activity. It goes to a factory. You've got people there, you've got money there, infrastructure there, you take water, you take other items, and you make a tomato ketchup. And then you come to the next biggest polluting factor. You take all forms of packaging and then you package this product. Then you do another polluting process, which is logistics. You take this tomato ketchup and you take it to all the hypermalls, all the shops, etc., to sell. Now go back in time. When we were young, there were only two brands of tomato ketchup in India, Halls and Kisan. We didn't have any other brand of ketchup. There's only one variant of ketchup that we had, and that's tomato ketchup, period. You wanted a ketchup, you got a ketchup. When you wanted to buy, it was demand-led. You went to the neighborhood store, what we call a Modi Khana, and you asked him, Bhaiya, humko ek matar ka ketchup dena, and he give you 100 ml or 250 ml bottle, just one standard bottle. You take it and he said, next time you want to buy, let me know a couple of days in advance. I'll order it from the wholesaler, who will ask the distributor and who will ask the company to manufacture it. So you fast forward to modern day society. You go to a hyper mall or you go to one of these malls, you got about what, 15, 20 different brands of ketchups. You got variants, tomato, chili, sweet and sour, whatever, I don't know. Then you got these SKUs that start from 10 grams, 20 grams to 1 kilo and 2 kilos, right? Coupled with that, you say one on one, you buy one, you get one free. So you end up buying about 1 kilo of different ketchups. Take it home. And then after a few months, you have consumed some of it, no doubt. But a lot of it, you take it, put it in the waste paper basket. It goes into the ocean and it's dumped there. So the little tomato, humble little tomato, which is fresh resources, fresh air, fresh water, you've taken and polluted that same ocean. Because we today in the world are living in a hedonistic society. Our civilization is hedonistic right now. It is consumed by its own self. Therefore, the 3 E's which I thought of yesterday, I learned about more important E's also, which is to do with our Indo-American relations, which is estranged, engaged, embracing, economic, environmental. The 5 E's. Coming to the third E, and which is coming to the third C, which is corruption. It's a big thing. It's a big word. But is anything good and is anything bad? It's always relative. It's always circumstantial. What is incentive? What is corruption? We don't know. Right? In the animal kingdom, you have snakes, you have scorpions, you have centipedes, you got insects. They all form some function. So what we need to do is we need to focus on what is really corruption and what is really incentive, and take it in a way that we can handle it properly. So handle the third C properly. Coming to our E's, I personally feel that India-US relations need to transform itself on an economic platform, and that should be focused on the environment, and within the environment, I personally feel that just like India and Japan have established very deep relations in the railways, including the Shinkansen as a project. India and US, from the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, we are focusing on two particular products which we feel will actually help in transforming our relations with the US on the most important element which the US looks at, and which is balance of trade. Our balance of trade is skewed highly in favor of India. It needs to be counterbalanced. It's important. I learned many years ago, you have to do with tobacco, right? Okay. So the director of finance in ITC happened to be a friend of mine. I was friends of the family, Mr. Ghosh. And way back, I'm talking 1980, I just started my career. So I asked him for an advice and I said, Uncle, tell me, what would you advise me? And tell me, how come you became a director at such a young age? And he said, very simple, don't laugh at me when I answer this question, but it's very, very simple and straightforward. So I said, what's that? He said, well, I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, at the right moment to be selected as a director. It's got nothing to do with my intelligence, right? So is the case with any and everybody. The second thing, which is the most important thing, he said, if you want to be relevant and successful in life, any meeting you go to, any person you meet, first find out what that person wants and give that to that person. Don't worry about what you want. He will figure out how to give you what you want, right? So I say that in our Indo-U.S. relations, America wants a balance of trade. Let's give that balance of trade to America. I know America will figure out a way of how to balance us out, right? And I personally feel that drone mobility is something that's going to transform Indo-U.S. relations big time. I say this with a sense of destiny. I never prepare my speeches ever. I always talk straight off the cuff when I come in, and things happen. So it's just fortunate. I've been focusing on drones. I've been talking to the commercial section in the US Embassy. We've been focusing on drones, trying to get some technology and companies here. There's a reason for that. And I've been trying to find someone in India or people in India who are already developing. And last night over dinner, I was talking to one of our chamber members, and right at the doorstep, when you're about to get in the car, he said, you just said something about drones. I said, yes. He said, well, I can introduce you to a person who is living in Kaladi, right? And he's one of the foremost exponents of drone technology in India. And 3 weeks ago, my wife asked me to go to Kaladi for different reasons, right? For Shankaracharya's temple visit. And this coincided. This happened just this morning on breakfast. At breakfast table, I spoke to him. So right after this conference, I'm going right now. The reason I talk about drones is that it's, in my calculation, a humble calculation, straightforward also, just on a paper, it can save about $15 billion of resources and money for this country. Transportation is the wheels of the economy. And similarly, like the red blood corpuscles in your body and the veins in your body that carry the blood, same way, all the vehicles in an economy through the arteries, that's the roads and highways, carry all the goods and services which fuel the economy and which generate the surpluses or whatever, right? The only difference is that the red blood corpuscles also clean and detoxify your body and take out the waste, right? But in the economy, with the current kind of logistics we have and the mobility we have, we are polluting it and creating waste. So there are two different things. Now, drones do something different. First and foremost, drones don't use crude oil. Number two, drones don't need a road. So just like in the telecom sector, we all know what the cell phones have done to landlines. We don't need landlines today. We don't need sometimes. Again, you don't need copper. So the same way, instead of taking out commodities from the environment and polluting the environment and wasting it, cell phones have knocked that out. It's brought down the cost of communication to practically zero. Right? In the same way, drone mobility, in my humble calculation, is that 1 kilometer of a highway costs 50,000 crores to, it costs 50 crores to develop 1 kilometer of a highway, 50,000 rupees per kilometer per annum to maintain. Making a highway is polluting from word go till its end, which is all the materials that go to making the highway, you have to mine it. So you're polluting it. Transporting it, you're polluting it. You're making a road, it's polluting. You use the road, you're polluting. You maintain the road, you're polluting. Coupled with, if you are going from a district headquarters to a village or a small town, say 150 kilometers, 1 kilometers, right? You're traveling at an average speed of 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers an hour. A drone can do that at double the speed minimum, right? Second, that 150 kilometers is circuitous, whereas a drone goes more or less straight, linear. So I personally feel that Indo-U.S. relations can transform itself in handling these aspects of the environment, making it a war on the environment. I have a quote, and which is, we shouldn't be defrayed by conventional wars of man against man, wherever they may be. The enemy is within us. In defense of Mother Nature, man is his own greatest enemy, and he has to be defended against himself. Like in the animal kingdom, insect kingdom, it's only the ants that fight with each other, and so do we. And we are destroying the environment, we are destroying this planet. We think we own the planet. When we buy a property, we are multimillionaires or whatever. No, you don't. We are all tenants on this planet. We are all passing by. We need to treat ourselves that way. India and America, I must say, I would say that coming back to change or continuity, we are complementary with ourselves. We all know about the democratic aspect, the knowledge aspect. I would say that there's another letter that's very important, and that's K, which is knowledge. America, my father, it's another thing which was taught to me by my grandmother when I was about 5 or 6 years old. She asked me, she said, who's your best friend in life? And I took my best friend's name. She said, no. I took another friend's name. She said, no. So I got confused. I said, what do you mean? So she said, there's no person in the world that is your best friend. It's knowledge and books that are your best friend. When you're in a crisis, at that point of time, nobody is going to come and help you. It's your knowledge that's going to come to help you. America is one of the largest investors in technology, in R&D, in knowledge per se. India also is an investor in knowledge. Our knowledge is spiritual knowledge. Our knowledge is inward knowledge, right? So we complement each other, and I think we need to build on our strengths as two democracies, as people of free speech, with a focus on environment, with a focus on the economy, and like I said, on the 3 E's. Thank you very much.
For the rights and particularly Then we take a few questions from all of you. Yeah, I also. Both panels deserve a huge amount of applause. Taking off from where they said, that is two questions to ask of panel. One is straight away, given a target of $500 billion, really managing around that number. And then
First of all, 500 billion is a very, very ambitious target. And the popular saying these days is that Modi hai to mumkin bhi hai. So we have, no, but then what happens is that part of our production process, manufacturing and many of the processes still continue to be bureaucratic in nature. And we have reluctance to open up ourselves. We don't accept our limits. And that's from the Indian side particularly. But then, thing is that we have come to a time frame where either you are open, efficient, and you survive in the market, or the market will go past you. We have no choice. So $500 billion is obviously a very, very ambitious target. And we also equally have the structural necessity to reform ourselves, starting from our schools, colleges to industry. That's right.
the same question to
I think, in all fairness, I would say that one element is that the pandemic has definitely set us back more than just 2 years, probably a decade, in every sense of the word. So it's kind of it's a seismic shift in our thought processes. If you look at it, in some ways, we've gone back to the Nehruvian era, right? Because of our circumstances. But I think more importantly is that our trust and our openness with the US still needs a lot of working on. I personally feel that an American enterprise, when it comes to India, I take my hat off to Amazon, I'll be honest with you. They're doing a fantastic job. It's a company that has changed my lifestyle and my style of buying products. I had an experience earlier that anything I bought, I just couldn't get it fixed, I couldn't get it repaired, I couldn't do anything with it. So I stopped buying those things. In Amazon, they got a technology, right? I don't know what they do. It's definitely a damn good technology. You buy anything, it's delivered on time. You don't like it, you just return it. No questions asked. It's an American enterprise. It's not Indian, right? So if we trust more American enterprises coming to India, just like I wanted to say another thing out here, that we need to have a leap of faith between our two countries. As simple as that. Just like during the Nixon and Kissinger era, there's a leap of faith in America on China. You just see what it did to China. It transformed China, right? America gave faith to China. What China did with it is a different issue altogether, right? I'm sure that India is not going to do that. But I'm sure that if we give America a chance in India with a leap of faith, we can. 500 billion is nothing. It's nothing.
I had this on the top of my list, the Amazon part of it. The Amazon, the Walmart, and let's say Germany's Metro, don't you think that apart from, let's say, Reliance also coming in now very strongly, A lot of domestic trade is going to go into their hands, and that way a lot of money is going back to the states.
Well, this is something like saying that when Rajiv Gandhi was there and he brought in computerization to the banks, and all the banks shut down for about 2 weeks, saying that we're going to lose our jobs because of technology, right? No, it's on the contrary, it's improved the functioning so much that you can see where the economy is going now because of the banking system. And second, employment has only increased. It's a question of mindset. It's a mindset. I think the issue is that you should hand over to entities and people who know how to conduct things in a genuine way and in a forward-looking way.
I think that itself is a debate for a full day. We'll come back to that some other day, but then we'll move on to the next question. So you were talking about export, and you were talking about student education as export. We in Kerala, we also talk in terms of manpower export, which is going into the entire Persian Gulf. Many of our major investors, they all made their money in terms of sending manpower out there. My question to you is, when we are having all our students out there in the US, isn't it possible, like how they have done well as startups here, can't we get into manufacturing also there? That goes for the Indian businessman also. So we find that today the average Indian businessman is a hard-nosed character, and he is very professional today. You see the number of industries, the way they move around. What you saw about 10 to 15 years back is not the same thing today. Today, the way each of the industries is performing and the manpower and the type of executives they have, they're all doing an amazing job. Can't we set up something in the US?
You've taken words out of our mouth. Definitely, an Indian should and can go across to the US and set up shop out there. If we can run our business in India, we can definitely do it in the United States of America. Yeah. And I just gave this advice to a company that came to me with LED lighting from Bangalore just 2 weeks ago. And they were talking about export, etc. So I said, you got technology, you got everything. Why don't you take, you want something from an American company? I said, why don't you co-invest? Why don't you partner them as equals, right? Invest out there. And then you find that they can also, with their technology, co-invest with you in India. So it has to be a collaborative experience. Here, I would say there is a factor. The factor is that when America sleeps, we wake, and when we sleep, they wake, right? So you have to have trust between each other in order to establish enterprise out there. But you've got to have an American running it out there, and here you have yourself running it in India as well. The trust has to be established. And second is understanding of the system. The American system of working, an American economic system, is quite different to ours. Our timelines are quite stretchable.
Yeah, but yeah, please.
Very interestingly, I think if we put the data together, the Indian restaurants world over, the amount of jobs they have created in the host countries are far more larger than the major manufacturing plants and other Tata's in UK. In 2014, they became the largest private sector employers themselves. So we have reached across US. Now, these days, they all, it's called English Oxford Dictionary, added a new term called hotels. The highway restaurants are no more motels, they're all hotels. 90% of the highway restaurants are owned by the hotels of Gujarat. So the English dictionary itself had to accommodate. So that way, if you look at it, I think the whole larger framework of migration, I recently worked on that, is now beginning to be circular in nature. Circular, and I'm teaching, all my students are engineers. Many of them, you name it, they are all young, talented, and outgoing. Startups and those kind of many of them they would like to go to developed economies. But then many of them also want to come back and do something. And the whole process, efficiency, and the ability of the market to create wealth, that will determine where will they go. So the direction and the location will be determined more by the efficiency of the prospect than who we are, whether India or US.
I want an interesting example, real example of here it is. Mahindra and Mahindra. They started off with Jeep Chrysler, right? American product, American technology in India. Today, they've invested in the United States and they are one of the largest tractor plants and largest market share of tractors in the United States.
Typically, that is the general discussion about American goods versus, let's say, Japan. Japan, because the quality of goods and for the sturdiness of the American goods is already known. But practicality, Japan, and that's the reason why China also came up from sets. I'm not using it as a fun anyway. But the manufacturing in US is mainly limited to hard stuff like arms, defense, and hard machinery, pillars, and things like that. Now, as a result of that, we were discussing something about agriculture and the involvement of the population in agriculture. We said that only 1% of the Americans are into agriculture, but their efficiencies are almost 100%. Now, what happened to Punjab? All the farmers there also went away to the UK. They're operating their what do you call that, water resources and all that from there. And the poor farmer has moved over to Madhya Pradesh. And they're doing very well. So what do you have to say about agriculture in the US method versus us? And as an economic
there's a wonderful book written by Kenichi Omare, who was the head of McKinsey in Japan, called The Borderless World. He explains, and I accept it too, that when you talk about manufacturing, growing, anything, an economic process, or even natural agricultural process, you must remember there's never enough money, there's never enough land, there's never enough any resource whatsoever. So you've got to make sure that you use each thing in the most efficient way. So an example he gives is that if the best oranges are grown in California, in America, then don't try and grow them in Nagpur at an inferior quality with inferior resources. You buy them in from California. In the same way, mangoes grown in India are best grown in India. So you grow them in India, you don't try and transplant them in the United States or wherever. So actually saying when you look at any agricultural item or for the manufacturing, it needs to be looked at on a global landscape with less resources, right? And when we talk about tariffs, he says the borderless world, he says that economics is such that it does not care for tariffs and government structures. It will find a way of its own in flowing into the right place at the right.
Agriculture, as far as India is concerned, I see it as a major fault line. Half of India's labor market is there in agriculture. And very interestingly, many of you will be surprised to know that we have more agricultural land than China. And we do cultivate them. We cultivate more quantity of land than China. But we produce, for unit of land we cultivate, we produce only half of what China produces. We need serious modernization in the whole sector itself. I think the Americans 1%, but for unit productivity, be it in Japan also, nearly 3 to 4 times than per unit of productivity in India. Agriculture has to be modernized. Serious intervention has to happen. Otherwise, you have many enough like type of farmer suicide is a major challenge. So we have to reform, and reforms will certainly involve serious modernization, what we call technological intervention, and that's where I think the American involvement possibly can be.
And I give you another example of where we have gone to the wrong products. Israel has been the biggest culprit there. So their technology has been amazing. But what we are growing from the partnership from Israel, particularly in Rajasthan, is now we are growing dragon fruit, strawberries, which are not my immediate requirements. So that is what you were saying. We need horses for the courses. And quickly run through a couple of points, but then we need some time from the audience to ask this question. So I just talked about 2-3 things. One is the entertainment industry is huge. We have not talked about it. In fact, now I think we have stand an upper hand over even the US in terms of action, in terms of money. Today, a movie like KGF is doing 500 crores and all that in no time. And that way, in terms of money terms, take cricket, for example, sport. These two movies and sport, that is Hollywood and cricket, have together given a huge model of business. Can we now take it to the US?
It's a very interesting take because Hollywood, yeah. So like Hollywood has been the soft power of not just the United States but the world at large, and now Netflix has taken over. So I would say that there is a collaborative effort that's taking place with Netflix sourcing Indian content into Netflix. That's a huge opportunity, and being done at a very good pace. The threat here is that Indian movies, for some reason, are finding very acceptance and popularity in China. And yeah, no, China is more important because of money flow that comes from China, royalties. Yeah.
I think we'll now leave this open to the audience. Can we have a few quick fire questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. It's been very they saved the conversation. I have one question to sir, you made a very analytical presentation for what's happening here, really the trade sector. You also brought out a concept called DTOE, where you brought these efficiency factors into how mobility can be in the market, whether it can sustain the kind of the trade sector what we have today. Are there similar data points to compare to see for China, their DTOE vis-a-vis also even countries like emerging countries like Taiwan or Vietnam kind of countries, so that we'll see how long we can sustain this surplus, where the competition we can settle. Just one more one. Two, you talked about the parity very high area, that it is true. But then if you look at the per capita socio non-economic spending what we are doing, vis-a-vis the per capita economic value we are deriving from each person. We have a very huge deficit there. As long as it continues to be there, I think we will face that problem. So you have a take on these 2 points.
First thing is that DTOT is necessary to calculate for any mature economy, and World Bank, I do it all the time. To look at it. There are 7 steps to calculate, and then only 4 steps I have given. We not doing it, but then now it is necessary. Data are available plenty, and any sector, any country, to put it, and then we do it in the class. Classroom we do it. So that gives us a perspective of where you stand, where you need correction. Yeah,
but we maintain this surplus.
I have it at the global level.
Thank you, sir.
I look at it, India, Central Asia, India.
CBPR kind of organization.
The next question, I'm hoping for quick fire questions and quick fire answers also. There's a lady out there, who can we have? You have a mic. I'm sorry. Yeah, go more attractive.
Other sectors is a highly unpopular policy, but nevertheless inevitable. I believe that it is inevitable. For politicians, they won't bargain for it. They won't try to do that because we still take proud of saying that we are an agricultural society. This 21st century, both the industrial revolution need to transform. Why there has been so much of settlement in agriculture is mainly because we don't have occupation. Unemployment was made the problem. So now tell me, how can we reduce the farm labor from 50%? It was almost 80% in 1947. Now coming down. As you rightly mentioned, many developed countries, on an average between 5 to 7% of the population, depending on agriculture, produces surplus agricultural products. But for us, it is more than 52%, yet not able to meet our own needs. Besides, it is not answering to helping our economy to grow. So, what is the way out? How can we advise the political leadership?
Yes, so we want to question.
Yeah, thank you.
Very quick response to that. If at all country wants to be developed, in a sense, then it has to be productive, and if at all you have to be productive, then you have to reduce the size of your agriculture market labor dependence. Without that, it is just not possible. And all the developed countries of the world, their agriculture sector now labor market is roughly around 3% of the population whereas all the developing countries, on the other hand, they have higher labor market agriculture sector percentage. India 50%. That's why we are not developed. China and India have started together a similar kind of a thing. China has now brought it down. The agriculture market size is only 26%, and it is continuously, drastically reducing, correspondingly creating. So how do you do that? That's where I think India has to really look at structuring the economy, opening up new sectors. Now, be the railways. Railways will need a lot of expansion, lot of sectors. That's what in economics we call it as a dual sector model. You have to open up a lot of sectors to, and that will help the agriculture sector where so many people are there who are not necessary. They are rather disguised unemployment actually. They are there. They have to be brought into other sectors so they become a source of labor in other sectors to be built, and they also rationalize the agriculture sector labor market. That's where.
Thank you. Great presentation. Very quick question. We on back to trade. So the United States and India are taking a protectionist direction. We don't have no political party in the United States supports trade right now. It's very difficult. We're building an economic framework, but we affirmatively are saying no market access. India did not join RCEP. We backed out of TPP. So interestingly, the United States and India, we have one more thing in common, which is that we are acting away from trade rather than moving forward. Like this one.
I think Indo-Pacific is the most the focused location of the world. Unfortunately, or incidentally, Ukraine just suddenly came in and then derailed the whole global narrative. Now, China has arrived, whether we like it or not, we cannot do anything. But very interesting framework I remember. Upwards and Mackinder. Mackinder is known for a maritime scholar. He used to be the director of London School of Economics. Back in 1904, he wrote some theories and all that. This prophetic saying I remember is that the monsoon lands of India and China, they will rise to prosperity, and they will rise to prosperity in the same year when Germany and Japan are tamed to civilization, and then with 1,000 million people and now civilizational value order, they will then balance the remaining global order. China, and in that he also adds that the rise of China may cause what he called it as yellow barbarism. So he has relied more on India to arrive to create a sobering effect of the global order. The Americans also have been predatory. So are the communists, and so is China. The only country that has not been predatory in its character. We have largely been like an elephant, very big in size, but vegetarian in character. And then that's why I think now Indo-Pacific narrative has to be rightly. That's what cyber definition of globally security and growth for all.
Thank you so much. The last question is for a lady.
Thank you, sir. So, I want to be the voice of the fewer people in India. So we know that in India, we have a huge disparity. Since morning we are talking about economics and business. I understand, I do not understand business a lot, but still I would like to ask us in this forum that what is hampering the textile handlooms getting into a huge market, an international market? Is it that we as Indians not valuing it, or is it that we have a lot of good standards in handloom, which is hampering it? What is your views? Thanks.
A quick response that Minister of External Affairs has created a very wonderful documentary on this. That the movement of Ikat, what we call in the saris, they have that in the border there's a story that goes from northeastern states, then it goes to Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and there's a whole lot of women activists that are working towards putting the threads together and creating the, and Minister of External Affairs of India has created a wonderful document of that. I think they're all valuable games, stories, traditions, and civilizational symbols. Now I think we have to also rise up and then take them to the right market, and it is our young generation people can connect it. Right market has to be created for that.
Can I just add that?
I love
Just one second. The handlooms have never been sold on mass scale. It has been a small trade, essentially a limited to the area. That's why we have a number of states having their own handloom zones. You have an umpteen variety of Indian handloom sarees for the average Indian customer. But this is not being sold as a brand India to the other countries. In fact, Kerala is going to start right now making the brand. And like that, I think all each state should now start doing that. And then you'll find a huge state out there, because cotton is very difficult to get today. As of today, cotton prices are just shooting up in the sky. The cotton is not available. And in Pakistan and 7 states, there are more opportunities.
Also, handlooms and any fabrics is an impulse buy in an emotive appeal. And the youth, the world over, especially the West, they do a lot of impulse buying. And handloom is not quite conforming to the latest pattern. So it will always be a niche sale for a long time, unless we transform it with some fashion house taking those handlooms and operating it within their own fashion and design.
And I think we'll wind up with that. It's been a real enriching session with two stalwarts in American trade and economy. Dr. Pradhan has been a real guru. Kapil has been a fantastic president of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce and a great ambassador for India. If there is anything else you would like to ask them, you could take their addresses from the panel here and confer with them. Thank you so much, sir. We look forward to a longer, bigger session sometime in the near future. And thank you, CPPR, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to the panel for a truly remarkable session. And request the panel to remain on the dais. I invite Professor Abraham, sir, advisor CPPR, to hand over the windows as a token of our gratitude and appreciation. I invite the chair, Mr. Anthony, to receive the window. I invite Dr. Prabha to receive the window. I invite Mr. Kabir. I request the panel to remain on the stage for the program.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you. There will not be a tea coffee break now, but the beverages and refreshments will be served. You can have a very short 2-minute break to use the washroom. After that, I request everyone to be seated for the next session. Thank you.